Lucy Letby, murder or mistake?
But I think all of us that were sat there in that courtroom understood why they'd come to that decision. It was multiple strands of evidence. The medical evidence was obviously important, but there was lots of different pieces of the jigsaw that came together. One of the most incriminating pieces of evidence was the green post-it note on which she'd written, "I am evil, I did this."
One of the most incriminating. Now, that intrigued me. I don't know if Liz Hull has ever mentioned, but she attended the trial. Let's see if that's what the prosecution was saying as well about the notes. So I have here the prosecution closing speech. I've got the full speech actually, not just a summary. And he says here, page 6, "I'm not going to spend a lot of your time looking at Lucy Letby's notes. There are more important things in this case." It's interesting that what Liz Hull finds the most incriminating, Nicholas Johnson pretty much dismissed. But one thing that I was looking at when I was, what did jump out at me when I was analysing the prosecution's closing speech, was how many times they had said that Letby had falsified the medical records, because I hadn't really heard that being discussed much before. And you know, the guilters, they like to play whack-a-mole with everything Letby related. Liz Hull especially, will bring up something and then it gets shot down, leave it a couple of months, they'll bring it up again, and these things sort of, go round in circles. The Facebook searches, the handover sheets, silly things like that. And I was intrigued because the falsifying of the medical notes very, very rarely crops up. I only sort of half heard it from like when Christopher Snowden mentioned it on that unheard extra trial, and Liz Hull has mentioned it before. I'll bring a receipt. I've got an old article from 6th of July. I think this one's actually behind a paywall, but luckily I shall penetrate it for you as I do. Her deliberate editing of nursing notes to make it seem like a baby was on the verge of collapse to cover her tracks. Now, I know why this isn't mentioned. It's because it is basically exculpatory. Before I'd highlighted, when I read the closing speech, I'd highlighted all of these occasions where that jumped out at me, where Nick Johnson had claimed she had edited the medical notes, and ChatGPT has told me there were 16 distinct references of allegations of her falsifying the notes. Now, before I called this lazy from the prosecution, that they couldn't even be bothered to construct a case based on the medical notes where they could allege a murder had taken place, and that they cut corners by saying that Letby had just edited that note, edited this note. But maybe it wasn't being lazy. Maybe what they're not talking about is they actually cannot say that this baby came to deliberate harm. They cannot say that this baby was healthy based on the current medical notes without having to have her quote unquote fabricating them. And there was no evidence that Letby had fabricated, falsified any of these notes. And I'll tell you for why I know for a fact that there was no evidence. Because falsifying medical notes is in itself a crime, and she would have been charged with that. Let's just say, I mean, the prosecution would pile as much on her as possible. There's no reason not to. We saw Charlie Kirk's murderer. He was count 1, aggravated. I know this is in the USA, but you can still do the same in the UK as far as I know. Count 2, felony discharge of a firearm. Count 3, obstruction of justice, moving a firearm. Count 4, obstruction of justice, disposing of clothing. It goes on. You get the gist. So, if Letby had falsified the medical notes 16 times, they would surely be able to charge her with 16 counts of falsifying medical notes or whatever. You know, just to add something on. But that didn't happen because she never did falsify the notes. The whole case was pinned on this, and it is conspicuous in its absence, the fact that this isn't brought up in the usual cycle of post-it confession notes, insulin, liver damage, Facebook searches. It's conspicuous in its absence that this isn't talked about.